What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Ladies Who Bronché. I am your host, Julissa Contreras. Super happy to be back with you for season 7, episode 1. We've been on a bit of a hiatus, but we are back in action. And I could not be any more excited than to have this wonderful guest. She is a powerhouse and has been someone who I've followed for many, many years, had a chance to collaborate with during Vamonos. So if y'all remember that wonderful family exhibit, this is one of the masterminds behind that exhibit. And I am just so grateful to be able to bring her into the folds of this conversation because I really think that she has for quite some time been modeling what it means to preserve history and how the preservation of history is also an honoring of ancestry and allows for us to go deeper into a relationship with our ancestors in a way that's very beautiful and I think honors cultures and practices that have been either forgotten or are hidden in the shadows in a way that this day and age, I think can come more into the light and could be useful tools for us all. So Djali, who the fuck are you?
Well, thank you for seeing the nuance in the work because when you don't have to explain it, it's so nice. My name is Djali. I am from Uptown. I do many things. I am an archivist. I'm a cultural preservationist. I guess you can also say I'm a folklorist. I am a Pan-Africanist. I work at many intersections of film, of TV, of documentary in general. I am a friend, I'm a partner, I'm a mother, I'm a big sister, and I'm here to get into it.
Yes. Honestly, like for me, I think the folklore of things is super important. I feel like growing up, and I don't know if this was your case, there wasn't a lot of support in bringing in some of the Pan-Africanism in the household. Like I know I was Black and my father, he light skinned, but
Mhm.
he would always say, oh, we're Black. And I remember being a kid and being like, no, Dad, like Black people are like African Americans, like we're Dominicans, and not out of a place of anti-Blackness, but literally out of a place of like, oh, well, we have this flag and this is the name of this nation. So like, isn't this all we are? And so at a young age, you don't know the difference between race, ethnicity, and all that. So like for me, that work of going into Pan-Africanism and being able to both honor what is Black about Dominican culture, but also understanding those intersections is huge and monumental in influencing all of the work that I do. So I love to hear you say that and claim that because I'm like, yeah, Pan-Africanism, it's a vibe. We need to get into it. I think there's a lot of work to be done there.
Oh, absolutely. I actually spoke with my mother about this yesterday. I went to go visit her. I was talking to her about how it's complicated and frustrating and all the things when like you see where we're at today because my personal upbringing was not that at all like we were so pan-African and to give context my identity is a lot like many New Yorkers. I got a lot going on here. So my mom is Dominican. She has Puerto Rican ancestry. My stepfather's Haitian. So I grew up in in a Dominican Haitian household.
Amazing.
Uptown. And then on my dad's side, he's Black and Afro-Indigenous. So my grandfather, my paternal grandfather is Gullah Geechee, right? And then, yeah, so people don't know that because I don't know that experience. I claim it's beautiful to be part of that diaspora, but I don't know what that means because that's not my embodied lived experience. I have been to the South once. When I went, I cried. I was like, my people. But I don't know that, you know what I mean? So I'm very particular in like what I lay claim to. I know who I am, but you never want to be disrespectful and like adopt an identity even if it is within you that you
Yes.
don't know about. And then on my dad's mom's side, my grandmother, she's Afro-Indigenous from the Delmarva Peninsula, so I grew up very like engaged in powwows. I grew up a jingle dress dancer. I still have my jingle dress upstairs. So yeah. And then my grandparents on my dad's side, my grandmother and grandfather, they met in Paris in '69 during like a whole wave of just Black creativity and Renaissance. And she was a photographer. He was a jazz musician. So my worldview, which is obviously so inspired by and informed by my family. It's one where like we were listening to Anthony Santos in the house, but also to Fela Kuti, and we were listening to Sugar Combo, but then also the Cepeda family and Bomba. So and then hip hop and like not only like 50 Cent and like Biggie, but like Dead Prez and like Tribe. You know what I mean? So it was like it was a lot going on all the time. But to be a Pan Africanist, I think, having that conversation with my mom yesterday and kind of trying to understand why it's so frustrating to be where we are today and why folks don't get and folks haven't really understood where I come from, like in general, in terms of like what I think. Going to school in El Barrio, growing up, and going to a predominantly white institution for college. You know, these views are so intrinsic to who I am, and was never something that I had to like question. It was never something where I had to choose, right? A part of my identity. It was never like, oh, I'm Dominican, but I'm also Afro Indigenous and I'm from uptown, but like my dad's side is from the South. And like, what does that mean? It was just like, you're all of it. And so I'm very lucky to have had that upbringing. And I always recognize my privilege in that because it is not the story or the case of many people, so I'm always very, very like, this is where I come from, this is my context, this is my framework, so this is where I'm coming from, so Pan-Africanism, that's like my whole worldview.
Yeah, it's so I love that. And I think that like as that like these intimate parts of our culture, Pan-Africanism have had a resurgence because I just want to say, right, like for us in our generation, it feels new and it's like, oh, where were these conversations? And it's like it has all existed, all very accessible if you were in the right places at the right time and had the right connections. And I think about even the conversation around Dominicans, like, oh, they don't believe they're Black. And I'm just like, the story is a little tired, mostly because what's happening is that we're looking at a majority view of people where, one, if you think about Dominican migration and the years in which that took place, for a lot of people who came in the 1960s and stuff, when you think about the civil rights movement, they might have missed the heat of really being in space and community with people during the prime parts of the action that we acknowledge as the part of American history where things were shifting. And we're coming into then what was still present, which was a really loud, biased, and anti-Blackness from an American culture standpoint that incited this fear of wanting to not be associated with something,
Yeah.
in addition to like just DR's history with race in general. And so like sometimes when people are having these conversations and like they talk in absolutes and like what it just doesn't make
Yes.
sense to me. So people like you who have had that upbringing, I'm like, see, like this is not some new thing, or it's not trendy, right? This idea that this conversation coming to the fold now means people are jumping onto a trend. First of all, a lot of the things, whether we're just talking about shared Black experiences or African spirituality, like eso se nace, no se hace, which means you're born with it. You don't make that, right? So like really,
yes.
like for a lot of people who are being called into that fold, self included, right? It's such a like intimidating landscape in that there's this vetting of like, oh, are you new to this or true to this? Like, where are you coming from? And a lot of that self exploration comes through a person's personal journey. Throughout my life, I think like I was on a track where I was like the valedictorian of my middle school. And like, I was like on the track to like white institution glory, right? Like I thought that I was going to succeed in life because I was going to follow all of these rules and do all the right things. And my life has been such in which I get dipped into these white institutions in very particular areas to really learn and observe things and unlearn things. And then I'm pulled out. And then I'm asked, how do you want to show up in the truth of your identity and what the people need and what you need? Because you are the people too. And so, again, that's why I love that it's in your work. I love that the storytelling does not fall short of offering those gems to the community. So, anyway, I want to get into some Bronché questions next, because even though we are not in a physical brunch, pretty soon we will manifest really sitting at fancy restaurants with people.
Absolutely.
Okay. We have you back when that happens. But for right now, if we were at brunch, what is like your favorite brunch plate?
Oh, girl, like it really depends, but like I love like an egg dish, like whether it's like something with like hollandaise. I love a sauce. I love a sauce. I do. I love a sauce. And so like we can do like an eggs like hollandaise situation or something where you like I can build my plate like some bread on the side and like a little, like that is where it's at. I like capers. So if there's some capers in the mix, that's great. Or like those little cute pickles, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
There's like a name for them, but of course I can't think of it right now. And yeah, or if not that, like breakfast burrito situation, love that. And always with
Mhm.
fries, not always with salad because it's not that deep all the time.
Yeah.
But
People
if it
can't eat salad at brunch. I'm sorry.
yeah, like I'm not necessarily trying to do like a side salad. But then I'm also like really into burgers. I'm also a burger girl. I love a burger. So it really depends.
Yeah.
But I'm always gonna get an Aperol spritz. That's my
Yes.
girl. I love an Aperol spritz.
I'm new to that game. Let me tell
Whew.
you, she's late, but she's right on time.
Me and my mother, like that's what we always get. And it just I don't know, like, you know, I love to make a moment, or I want to rephrase that. I've been really restructuring how I view just like life and the mundane, or what can be seen as the mundane, and like how do we like romanticize it. So like me and my mother get a little Aperol spritz, like why not, like a
Yeah.
little, and add a little bougie to the mix. So I
Yeah.
love that. And if I'm not having that, I'm a beer girl, so I'd have a beer.
Ooh,
Yeah,
okay.
I know. I don't know if you could tell or if that's like so crazy, but I'm more of a beer girl. Yeah.
I love that. It's funny. So for those who don't know, I'm now based between both New York and Denver, Colorado. And
Yes.
here in Denver, oh my God, like beer is part of the culture in such a big way. And so I'm not an anti-beer girly, but I'm not an IPA girl, which seems to upset many of the beer people.
I am not an IPA girl either. I am like a
Thank you.
Stella Artois. I'm like a light beer girl. But
Yes.
you know what it is? It's because so I also engage in winter sports, like I snowboard. And so yeah, I be snowboarding. And when you're on the mountain, it's nice to have like the IPAs because they're heavier beers, and so they warm you up faster, and like they do the job faster than like a Stella. Like even though I don't like IPAs, my man does, and I'll have like some of his after a long day on the mountain, or when we're at the top of the slope. So um
Yes.
yeah, it keeps
Love
you
that. What
warm.
inspiration. Just trying to be out in the slopes. It's like
Oh, it's so
very,
fun.
it's, I could tell it's fun. I'm more of a snow tube girl. I'm a child. So I just put me on something and slide me down the mountain of snow. But
uh,
really, I want to get into that because that's another part of Colorado culture is that ski, snowboarding. And I'm trying to be in the mix. I'm out
It's
here.
so nice, and like not to make it deep, but I always make it deep. There was a time that we went snowboarding in Vermont, and it was my
Mhm.
first time on like a mountain. And I understand for all those listening in Denver and just on the West Coast, or in the middle of the country in general, you don't consider East Coast mountains because they're much smaller and everything. However, for this East Coast girly, I went to my first mountain that was out of state, and just like being on the hill, being in Vermont, being on the slope, being so high up, I have never felt. There are few situations in which I have felt so free, and I
Wow.
was like, whoa, we need this. And when I say we, Black folks, brown
Mm,
folks, folks who don't have access, the people, the third world, I
yeah.
was like, we need this because you feel like it takes your breath away. Being able to see the world from that level, like, being so many feet high up, I was a mess. I was like, oh my God. I was like, here we are, and liberation. And like, how can we get our people here? And there are a lot of, which I can plug you into, there are really great folks doing work, bringing Black and brown kids from the city to mountains. And so I'm like such a fan of, there's this one organization I'm thinking of, and another one called Dominican Snowboarders that are really doing the work, bringing our folks out there and riding with like Dominican flags. I'm like, oh my God. And flags are flags, but it's still the representation that like I need. So
Yes, I love that. It's so funny because I was going to say, I was like, there's like a Facebook group called Dominicans in Denver, and there's like maybe 300 people in there. And like, that's the joke is that we're like, oh, we're like not here. And so I have been saying, I need to hook up with the right folks because I need to bring more Dominicans out to Denver so that they can have that experience. Not that DR has beautiful, lush mountains, but again, there's a difference in scale. And that difference in scale really does add to that big, like, whoa moment that you're describing. And actually, that moment is what got me out here the first time I was here. I wasn't snowboarding, but I was driving up a mountain with a friend. This was around the time legalization had just started. So I had indulged in some snacks, right? And so I like was standing in this, just like, it just felt endless. And it was like a sea of mountains. And you think
Mm,
about the ocean, and I think about how endless the ocean looks, but I had never imagined seeing a mountainscape and having that same
mm-hmm.
feeling of infinite, just like possibility going forth. And I was like, whoa, this is like living in a calendar, National
Yeah.
Geographic. This is not Morrison Soundview on Westchester Avenue. And I could be
Yes.
here forever. So I came, so I moved.
I'm so happy for you. And like that you took that step, because it's, I can't imagine how hard it is to be somewhere that like we aren't necessarily always coming from a city and from a borough and from a neighborhood where we are very present. So shout out to you for
Yeah.
taking that leap.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. And so with your meal and your drink, what is some of the bronche bochinche that we are talking about at the table?
I think I think for me it's always like what I'm watching. So if we were, in person right now, I'd be asking you if you've like seen White Lotus, what your
Oh, yeah,
thought.
I know.
Oh my god,
It's on my list. I know. I know.
it's so good. It's so good. And like Black Mirror, if you've seen the
I
recent
haven't caught the new season yet, but yes, I am a Black Mirror girl.
oh
Uh-huh.
my goodness. I'm like, give those people a raise. I'm like, they are just so they're excellent. It's excellent. It's excellently done. I always give myself grace of like, I know the things I can do. I cannot do that. I
Yeah.
cannot conceptualize and be just so imaginative in that way, because like I'm I'm really freaked out by sci-fi, and I think we can get into this like later, because like it goes into like me loving tradition and being so about like grounding ourselves here and being
Mm,
so about like remembering, because there's so much to remember and there's so much work to be done here, and like you know thinking about there's so much healing to do and alchemizing to do, and so thinking about the fact that like society is so interested in in like moving forward, and I'm not talking about like like Afrofuturism or like what we've been engaging in as Black peoples since the 60s and 70s, and even jazz. If you want to think about it, jazz is like also scientific or science fiction, sci-fi, because it allowed artists in the 20s and 30s and 40s to kind of like escape and come up with something new and be in a different reality. So we've been doing that work, but like now it feels different. And Black Mirror, I remember reading somewhere that the creators were like, how you would describe it is 5 minutes into the future. And like, I cannot get down with like that being the future. It is so scary to me, girl.
yeah.
I am, tech is not my friend. Like, I do not engage with her. Um, uh, I'm one of those people who like, I had my iPhone 7 for many years until like, it was just like a joke at that point. So I would be talking about this. I would be talking about sci-fi. I would be talking about, you know, the fact that there is so much to do here. Yet
Yeah.
Katy Perry is going to is going to space or the atmosphere, right? The greater
Mhm.
atmosphere. And how I have no interest. I really have no
Mhm.
interest. I am so not interested in what's up there in a literal sense, because to me it is like humans playing God, and God, capital G, God, universe, spirit, Orisha, using all of this interchangeably, of course, the powers that be, that which is greater than us. Um, I'm very respectful of like, that is their domain and it is not for me. I am not interested. So we will be talking about that.
Yes, it's very fuck around and find out in ways that is different than skiing. Like skiing to me is like the kind of challenge and adventure we talk about. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know about and even it's so funny. I think about the land in the ocean, right? And like the depths of the ocean, though it is not the same as the greater atmosphere. I think that there's some shit down there that we are also not supposed to know.
Oh, absolutely not. So like the biggest joke with like my man and my family, my friends is like Djali is so like earthly, like earth based. I'm like the ocean, as you know, like that is like, yeah, my Yasna Arisha. Like I revere her. I'm like my madre mia, like that is your domain, you
Yeah.
know? And like I respect that. The sky, the air, I love to travel. A big joke about me is like I don't I don't think we should be up there. I'm like, this is not real. Like this doesn't make sense. I'm like, it's very heavy. This, you know, like a plane is very heavy. How are we up there? And it's scary to me. And all of it comes back to, I think, just like, you know, like the idea that I just I'm really respectful of the things that I don't know and the forces that I don't know. I think the ocean is so alien and it's so cool. But I am not the one who wants to be like in the submarine exploring. Es
Yeah.
que yo no necesito eso. Like
Yeah.
I don't need it at all. I'm good just like looking what I can see from here. A coral reef, beautiful. But like then people who like go down, absolutely not.
Yeah.
So
You already saw with that little trying to go deep into the Titanic that what happened to that
I
pod, you
know.
know, may they rest in peace. But
I
like
know. And
I was like,
it's not that I don't like I'm not interested in exploration. Exploration is beautiful, but I'm
mhm.
not interested in conquest. And I feel like we are
Yeah.
engaged in a culture of conquest. It's not just like, oh, I want to see what's up there, but it's like, how can we colonize? How can we colonize Mars? How can we, you know, I'm sure if they could colonize the ocean, you know, not it's not for me. So
Yeah.
exploration is where it's at, but like the conquest, count me out, all the way out.
I love that. Well, all right. We are going to move into our cheers section where we shout out dope people, brands, or spaces doing dope shit. I wanted to give out a shout out to Incultured Company, which is founded in 2018. And it's a wonderful organization that is committed to building social justice, racial equity, and lasting peace between Dominicans and Haitians. Because, hello, we need so much more of that. And as a Dominicana, like I have to say, it's such a I've never been in space of Haitian hate. Like I did not grow up in a household where we were
Me
hate.
either. Me either. That's like it's not my reality. And again, though, I always say that that is privileged. I always locate myself because I understand that that's not everyone's experience. But my stepfather is Haitian, my mother's Dominican. Her best friend from childhood, who I just saw yesterday, is Haitian. Who also her friends are Dominican. So I think it's also a very New York City experience. I think it's important to acknowledge and a very uptown experience as well. You
Yeah.
know, we're all together. Our experiences are ones of togetherness and of community and of communion, you know. But I agree with you. It is so frustrating because the narrative is so single note, and I think it does a disjustice to all of us, you know, like those of us who did not grow up like that, those of us doing the work. But in Culture Company, they are just so fantastic, and I hope that they just always keep on going, and they
Yeah.
always keep on reminding people, and they always keep on teaching. They are very, very, very needed.
Yeah, very needed and like very active, like not in just the content that they create, they also hold physical space to do workshops with community, which I is really my bag. Like, yes, I'm on these internets because that's the streets that everybody is on, but like I'm an in-person person. I like to do workshops in person. I like to have these difficult conversations in person because I think that that is what's missing is actually the touch of reality of sharing space. And so I know that they have a few workshops coming up this season that I encourage everyone to go check out and support them in any way you can. Perhaps it's not something that you want to attend, but you're like, I know this work, I know it's important. Go ahead, suelta lo cuarto. That we need it. We need to continue to support. So, Djali, are there any things that you want to shout out today?
Yeah, so we just ended Black Maternal Health Week, and I would love to shout out Mama Glow. Mama
Yes.
Glow is, and their space is called a soft space or the soft space. I would like to shout them out because they are just doing the work, and they have been doing the work for a very long time. They center maternal health, Black maternal health, brown maternal health. They bring lots of conversations to the forefront about equity. And you know how New York City, despite it being New York City, there's so much inequity here as it relates to Black families, brown families, immigrant families, young families, all of the things. And they activate their space, the soft space in Williamsburg, to host conversations about parenting, about endometriosis awareness, about all of the things, womb health, self-care, And I was lucky enough back in 2017 to become a doula under their first cohort. I don't know if you even know that about me, but like,
I didn't. I was
yeah,
gonna
girl.
say, wow.
Yeah, yeah. So that's something that's like very important to me too. Is my doula scholarship and learning and showing up for my peoples, whether or not you're interested in having children. I think that we deserve to know about our bodies and what they do and what the functions are. And should we decide to have a kid or grow a family, what does that look like? You know, like literally, like biologically, what does that look like? What should you be experiencing? And I think that we have so little access to that knowledge, at least speaking for myself, before going through my doula training. I didn't know about my body at all, and let alone the bodies of my mother, of my grandmother, of the women in my life. And so I'm always talking about like womb health and talking about these things. And my education is, I'm continuing it all the time through Mama Glow. And so I just want to shout them out. And I think everyone should do their training and just learn. It's such vital information. Always, particularly now, but always. So Mama Glow and the Soft Space by Mama Glow. Those are my peoples.
Shout out to them. Thank you. That's a new one for me. I didn't know that space. So I'm excited to check it out. I think that that leads us perfectly into our Tuta Loca is where we shout out motherfuckers who are doing the most. Because this week I mean, there's many things we can call the government out for right now, but I did want to focus in particular to the way in which I'm calling it, they're trying to like rebrand motherhood. They're trying to entice people with $5,000 checks, like $5,000 is really enough to cover all of the damage that is caused by all of the services that they're not providing and all of the ways in which they're stripping other things. And so I just like, I'm curious for you, and you know, you're big on motherhood and the connection to motherhood. What has your response been to this climate and everything going on? Any thoughts, you know, frustrations?
You know, I think as all of us are, I'm frustrated. But what has been really important to me is trying to uphold a practice of self-preservation within the chaos and within the madness. As a mother, I refuse, to the best of my ability, to allow the political scape to affect my kid. Like, absolutely not. In the sense of like affecting mommy, right? And affecting my mental health and my aura, and then that being transmuted to my kid. I think that motherhood, parenthood, it's something that is so beautiful. And for me, in my lived experience, it's something that was never forced upon me. I was lucky enough to have a family that was like, girl, you need to like get your degree and like do you first, you know, like it was always that. It was always do it if you want, you know, which is crazy, like with my Dominican mother, you know, like that being the tune was very liberating, right? And so motherhood, parenthood, growing a family, I think these are things that whoever you are, wherever you are, should be done as best to our abilities consciously. You know, it is the utmost responsibility to bring life into this world. And you have to also know that like you're going to also be constantly like rebirthing yourself too. Like birth is not just like you bring a kid out and that's it. Like you're birthing yourself too. Um, a father, a support parent, another mother, whatever your familial dynamic looks like everyone is being birthed, right? Into a new space. And so I think that's something that is so transformative, something that is so important, something that is so special, something that is so sacred, something that is so ceremonial, is very personal. And to have anyone, any government, anyone, make you feel like you don't have agency over that, over one of the most, in my experience, the most transformative ceremony of life I have been through, is it's irresponsible. Because when you think about children, when I think about children, and I think about folks who are forced to have children, and I think we can speak candidly in our neighborhoods where we grew up, maybe not our families, but being around families who did not have support, whether it was that physical support, that village, whether it's monetary, whether it's just resources, whether it's access to food, access to prenatal vitamins, access to prenatal care. You see how that in turn affects a family and in turn affects a community, because these cycles, continue on. I think about the mom who's so stressed out because she has to like work mad jobs, and then she snaps at her kid, and then everyone on the bus is looking at her snapping at her kid, and her kid is like, why are you snapping at me? And if we were in a space in which parents, mothers, fathers, support systems, if we were in a space in which we were respected, a space in which we had the adequate resources to bear life safely, without fear of death, without fear of impoverishment, without fear of scarcity, it would be a different conversation. But we have free will, and there are billions of people on this planet, meaning there are billions of ways to exist. And parenthood is not for everybody. And I think to know that and to stand in that and to be firm in that, that is a superpower, because it's to know yourself. And oftentimes I think that we do things, or we're pushed to do things, because it's what we have to do. It's what we're being mandated to do. And that often 9 times out of 10 bears resentment. And no child deserves to be resented. No partner deserves to be resented because of a choice like this. And no mother, no giver of life should self-resent for making that choice. I don't think it's for everybody. Me being a mother, I'm like, oh, this is not for everybody, but it's for me. And that's beautiful. And I'm so happy that I answered the call and that I listened to what my body, my mind, my spirit, God was telling me to do, because I am in my purpose. There is nothing greater in my life than being a mother and to mother. But I also think some of the best mothers are tias, who maybe don't have their own children, like titis, they're like the best. Like my titi, and I have many aunts, but like my titi, like it's only one titi. Like she is the one, and she's a mother. But before she was a mother, she was my mother. She was a mother to me. So it's incredibly unfortunate that something that is so personal and so monumental and life-changing, in that you bring another human into this world. They're not just your child. They don't belong to you. You rear them, you guide them, you love on them, you support them, but they are their own human. To bring a human onto this planet is a very big responsibility. And no one should feel forced or coerced in having to make such a decision, is what I think.
That part, because $5,000 in this economy for a baby, please come at me correct. If you don't come at me that way, come at me correct. Come at me with the full tuition for fucking daycare that is costing people thousands and thousands of dollars a year. Like, I think that, to your point, right, there is this neglect around the sacredness of this process, right? And not just the sacred portal of giving birth, but like the sacred rebirth that everybody is collectively going through in creating the village for this infant that will be in coexistence. And so to know that the country, the government is in itself is not in a place where it wants to prepare the space for what it is calling in, I think should be the sign to everyone. And, I know that there are a lot of people, even in our own community, who are very much like, anti-abortion and things like that, which, listen, I actually respect all opinions, whether you want to terminate a pregnancy or keep it, or if you're somebody who really supports keeping it because you feel life is that sacred and you're like, yeah, there are people and their support system. I totally understand that, but I think we need to start framing our beliefs around the reality that we are in and the times that we are in, and finding ways to speak to the nuance, right? To say that you want to be pro-life is to also say then perhaps that you are going to be pro healthcare, pro, healthier foods, a lot of other aspects that affect a child just as much as the parent. And that's the other thing. I think we throw away the adult and just focus on the child. And it's like the wellness of the adult in the situation, whether it is the birth parent or a parent that takes the child on in a different capacity, matters. And so you hear things that are sweeping like a $5,000 check, and that might sound nice in a world where it's like, oh, well, nobody ever gave people money for giving birth before. This
Mm-hmm.
is progress. And it's actually like, no, this is distraction. This is illusion.
Yeah.
This is, asking you to sign a contract to give away a lot more just to say that you get the immediacy of these $5,000, which they know in an economy like this, for some people would sound tempting. And perhaps there would be people who are like, yeah, I need this check and I'm not going to raise this child. Run me my
Mm-hmm.
check. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea that you are now giving people incentive for something that they do need because of all these other circumstances, but then a child is on the other side of that, like, what? I just wonder
Yeah.
and I'm wonder for people in the comments, when you're watching this later on, like, what do you, like, does that make sense? Like, am I bugging? Because it just,
Yeah. No, the incentivizing is really something else, because again, it's not just like oh, go try out this new restaurant and we'll give you money, or come be part of a focus group. Like, we're used to that,
right.
right? But this is quite literally like the most life-changing experience. And also, it's important for people to know pregnancy looks different for everybody.
Hmm.
And pregnancy can be really complicated. Pregnancy can not be complicated. Pregnancy is a spectrum of experiences, as is birth, as is postpartum, as is raising a child. And so it's not that easy. It's not as easy as just carrying a baby for 9 months and giving birth and taking photos. It's not, like, there's folks who struggle, right, conceiving. There's folks who um just don't have the access to the care that they need, and therefore have issues, or complications rather, that arise in the wake of a pregnancy, even if they were healthy before, right? There's also what pregnancy brings up in terms of our mental health, right? Like, pregnancy can trigger lots of things. The thing that you went through back in the day that you pushed aside, maybe that comes up, you
Yeah.
know or the things, plural, because we all go through a lot, especially as women, right? Everyone goes through a lot. I don't want to diminish what men go through, because men go through a lot too. And everyone who exists, everyone goes through things. But pregnancy does something. It literally alters the chemistry of your brain and your body.
Yeah.
And so things are brought up that can really alter, you know, your mental health, and how you even like approach a pregnancy. And so, yeah, just the incentivizing, it doesn't make sense. It's like you said earlier, just another thing in a slew of things that don't make sense, that are harmful. um the way that I am protecting myself in this moment is, and perhaps there is a level of privilege in it. I I will stand in that because it's true, but I'm trying to just like focus on my kid and focus
Yeah.
on myself, because people have like we've been mothering, we've been parenting since forever. Folks found a way to parent on plantations. Folks found a
Yeah.
way to parent in Jim Crow South. Folks found a way to parent during the Trujillo dictatorship. We always find a way to do it. We always find a way to persevere. We always find a way to smile and find joy, even in the darkest of moments, even if it's temporary. We
Yeah.
do. And so that's where I'm at. That's where I'm kind of trying to lead from. I'm like, my literal DNA that I carry, these epigenetics within this body, are ones that have been informed by folks being able to parent well or not is another conversation. But folks in my lineage, in your lineage, but in my lineage, being able to parent in the face of chattel slavery, in the face of being bought, sold, kidnapped, in the face of, on my dad's side, Jim Crow South, in the face of the Depression, we find a way.
Yeah.
And there's always some ones in an office, in the offices, who make laws that benefit some and that don't benefit others. And despite what side you're on, and despite who is benefiting and who is not during any particular moment in time, we find a way. We push through. That's what we do as Black people. We push through. We're going to be doing the line dance with the fan, like that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to still be doing the cookouts. We're going to still be finding joy, because if we don't have joy, if we don't have that radical love for ourselves and our people and our physical existences, and by proxy, our spirit, we don't got nothing. So I'm really here just trying to root myself in the joy. And I know it can sound toxically positive, but I'm not trying to come at it from a lens of toxic positivity. Absolutely not. Yeah. I'm trying to come to it from a lens of, what can I do?
Yeah.
And what I can do right now is to just slightly lower the bass on all of that. Cause I can't deal with it. I can't.
100%. And there's talks of them trying to give out motherhood medals. And if that is true, I think you deserve one, because fuck out of here. Not that we want the musty ass medals, but whatever. If we gonna do it, and running my check.
If we're gonna do, it's just it's so wild. I wonder. I don't know if your school was like this, but when I was in high school, in 10th grade, sophomore year, we all read *Handmaid's Tale*, and here we are, and I'm gonna leave it there. But it's just like, whoa, wow, okay. And being a kid and being like, oh my goodness, how could anyone think of this? Margaret Atwood, wow, can't believe you can have such an imagination. But here we are.
The imagination ain't nothing but a vessel for other truths that higher powers are trying to drop into us, and we just think it's ours. It's ours to share, but we aren't always as creative
as we think.
Sometimes it's
fantasy. I agree. I agree with you on all fronts on that.
Amazing. All right, so now let's move into our plate of the day. Pictures worth 1,000 words and history worth a revolution. That for me feels like the headline. If I had to do a biography on you and your work, to me it's pictures worth 1,000 words, history worth a revolution. Not just because of the history that is held within the photographs and the different families that are represented, but also the history. And you shared some of this already about your upbringing. You have a family of many talents that have contributed to the earth through music and so many other forces, that all of that is worth the revolution of protecting and preserving what is true for you, because that you are one of many people in our community, in our diaspora, who have those stories. And that stuff is super, super important. And so I'm curious, what was your relationship or perception with archival work before NuevaYorkinos even started?
Yeah, so again, locating myself in a position of privilege. My grandmother, my dad's mother, who is my girl, I call her Mima. We call her Mima. So Mima, she was a law librarian at the Bronx Supreme Courthouse for many years. And before that, she worked at Schaumburg for many years. And so my grandmother, whenever I would go to the Bronx to, visit her or to spend the weekend, and my mom would drop me off at the Sugar Cube, which is what they call it, the courthouse. I would always just be in the library with her. And so she taught me, of course, Dewey Decimal System. She taught me the importance of checking out a book properly and returning it on time properly. And my grandmother, Mima, she is such a force. I have to attribute my love for archival to her. My mother is also very big in archival, but the importance of the importance of it and the gravity of it comes from my elder. It comes from Mima. And pretty much, in her apartment that is still in the family, as happens with, public housing, her apartment on a very high floor in the South Bronx projects in Soundview was a museum. It was not what one would attribute to a public housing apartment. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so on the walls were so many things. My great grandfather was a merchant marine. And so he was on the ocean all the time for 30 years. And so he brought back home to his wife, my great grandmother, to my grandmother, his daughter, all these things from his travels, whether it was photos of beautiful women from Algeria. He's a Black man going to Algeria in the the 40s on a boat, or whether it was different vinyl, different music that he bought or that he found, out in his travels. He brought a lot of things to the house that made it on the walls. And then I guess that started or that inspired my grandmother to also put things on the walls,
Yeah.
and to also collect. And so through the collection of books, Mima's books, stop playing. Mima's books, stop it. Stop it. There's books that only exist in the credenza. They do not come out of the credenza.
Mhm.
There are books that you can touch, but like, don't touch them. Just because you can doesn't mean that you should. And so whether it was her book collection at home, her photos, so many photos, her vinyl, so many
Mm.
records that my dad has inherited a lot of them because like he's a DJ and he actually like plays them still. Also just like things like trinkets. As an Afro-Indigenous woman, my grandmother and I, like I told you, would go to powwows, and a lot of her community of Afro-Indigenous people, of urban Indigenous folk in New York City, people don't necessarily think of New York City as an Indigenous space, but we have a huge Indigenous population, whether it's
Mm.
Afro-Indigenous folk, immigrant Indigenous folk from present day Latin America, Central America, like different parts of Turtle Island. Many people come here for school, right? We have a huge indigenous community out here. And so Mima would always collect her jewelry at different powwows. And so she has the most, it's a treasure trove of just native jewelry, from all the turquoise you can think of to the silver to all the things. And so with her being a collector and understanding the importance of the tangible as conduits of memory, that's something that I really took in. And Mima, she calls me her daughter. I think like the grandkids, the first grandkids, because I'm the first, I'm the eldest. The first
Yes.
grandkids, eldest daughter, that's a whole other thing. But it's
For another day.
it's another podcast for another day. And like my dad is the eldest too, and my mom is the eldest. So I come from
Mm.
like a trifecta of the eldest. But you know, being her daughter, I just learned so much, learned under her, and so I always understood like the archive was important. And then when I was in college, I took a course with, I always sing her praises, my professor Amy Saul, who I am obsessed with, and I think she is just so divine, and I still keep up with her. We took, or she taught a course on the African gaze, and
Mm.
in photography and cinema, and the differences between European lenses, and then when we're able to tell our own stories as Africans and Africans of the diaspora, as Black folk, what does that look like? And so we had so many conversations about the colonialism of the archive
Mm.
and the problematics of the archive. And I think that's a bigger conversation of like the problematics of museums, and museums are so important, like so important. Some of the ways in which they acquire,
Right.
is not it at
They
all.
cheat. We could say it. They
Yeah,
stole shit
it's
and
lots of
claim.
thievery, yeah, and like the thievery is something that I think is so intrinsic in archives, because archives are a testament to like who had the power to do the thing, like who had the power to archive. And now I'm talking about like the specific archives of like written documents, right? Like who was able to like have the pen and know how to write, like who was able to document in that way. And so for me, having that course, taking that course, being able to chat with Amy about like all of these things, how we are remembered is a huge part of archival work. And like, what does that look like when we reclaim archival processes? And how can we reclaim archival processes that don't necessarily fit within the parameters of what we associate with archive? An archive is not just like putting things in like a Rolodex. An archive is also a cookbook. An archive is also a family recipe. An archive is also the song that your mother sang, that my mother sang to me to sleep, that I sing to my kid. Like these are archival processes, ceremony, plant work,
Yeah.
um, all of it. Um, Spiritual systems to me, I think, are also archival. We can get into that. Braiding your hair, that's archival, to me. you know, wearing white is archival.
Mhm.
As Black people, that's archival. And then my, particular also spirituality that I practice is one that does not have a book. There's no central text. It is archival in the fact that it is an oral tradition that has remained since its rebirth in the Americas as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. And so, whether it was my grandmother or Amy's class or the system in which I grew up in, because my mother is a practitioner and a priestess within the faith that I am also a practitioner and priestess of. So I had this in my house. Very, again, so grateful and very, big on recognizing the privilege in which I come from, because I know it's not necessarily everyone's lived experiences, but the archive has always been present. Ceremony is archive. Yeah, it's all archive. So before NuevaYorkinos, I think I kind of was like the history nerd. I don't know. I love history. I'm like going on a tangent, but anything that like feels like historical, and like geeky is my thing. And so I started to like geek out about like, OMG, we have to like document our stories and our people, and duh, a photo album is an archive, like, and it's so precious. And the fact that in our families and our communities, we're not allowed to like take photos out of the album, and we have to take photos on our phones of the photos in the photo album. That's an archive in itself. So yeah, our
Yeah.
archive has been very important to me.
I love that. No, I love that there's such a deep, rich history, and like what an interesting family. Like you have so much to draw from. And I think, I think everything happens for a reason, and everything is aligned in a way that, like, yes, you have this very interesting family, but you being led to really continue the preservation of the histories and the stories and taking it onto platforms like social media, because you guys just don't, exclusively live on social media. You
Yeah.
guys do a lot of in-person activations. There's a lot of curation and community moments that come about. But I think that invitation through social media to say to people, yeah, submit photos. We're collecting an archive. It's kind of like, you see things in museums, especially when there's like photos of random people or people who aren't like historically famous in some way. You wonder, oh, how did we capture this, or how did this one random child's, like, who has like, there'll be a plaque that'll be like, oh, child sitting in window in Harlem, and you're like, who picked this child and why this picture, right? And so for me, when I saw your work, it was super exciting, because as a storyteller myself, I tend to draw from my own life a lot for inspiration. But for me, that is the vehicle to preserve, right? Where I'm like, all right, I come from a very secretive family. They don't like their business out there. But there are gems and things that I know are important for the world. And so I take those gems and I place them within characters that might represent some of my family, but more so represents universally the people who I am speaking to and wanting
Yes.
to have them see themselves,
Yes.
because that is a form of archival work. So I love that you're even naming, like, yes, the wearing of the whites, right? Anything that is upholding and keeping a tradition alive, connected to the history, and being able to say this is the why behind why this is done, to me is archival. When I went to Ghana and they poured libations, and the guy who was pouring libations, he was like, oh, you guys in the States think you're doing something, pouring something from the homies, bet you didn't know this is where it came from. And
Exactly.
it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, we actually already have all of these stories within us, and we're all doing this work, right? And so while NuevaYorkinos is defined in that way, and I would say Ancestral Allchemy as
Hmm.
well is this, even though it's not necessarily a photo archive, it is archival work to
Hmm.
me. And I think that the ways in which you guys are sharing bits and pieces of the ways that people can reconnect to their ancestors is important, because it is my belief, I know it's not everyone's belief, but it is my belief that deep connection then creates a pathway for meaningful change, to put you on the path towards what is for you and what you are meant to be called to, rather than distracted by things that feel like what you have to do. And so I just feel like that energy is very loud in the work that you do. It does not feel like you're doing it for the gram, as
Oh
they used
no.
to say,
Oh,
right? Like,
absolutely not.
it's very rooted. And I love that. And so I wonder, like, how would you say, if at all, the work that you do is intersecting with like revolutionary movements, whether that's personal movements that people are having for themselves or a larger movement, and it could be centered around Pan-Africanism or otherwise. But
Mm-hmm.
like, do you see that work as a function of that revolution, or just does it happen to intersect?
I never thought about it in that way.
Mm.
Because it just makes so much sense to me to do the thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was never an idea to like, oh, it's like needed right now, even though it is. It wasn't like to fulfill something that or add something to this larger moment. Really quickly, when I think of like ancestral alchemy, I think one of the ways that I can put it, did you ever watch Rise growing up? That film?
I don't know. I don't think
Oh,
so.
okay. So one of my favorite films growing up was called Rise. And Rise was a documentary about crumping in the West Coast.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's a
Yes.
beautiful scene in Rise that is an interplay of editing where folks are crumping and doing all that, which I used to think, girl, I used to think I could crump.
Me
I
too. And I couldn't.
like absolutely, like it was not cute. But there was a scene where they're editing between this, these bodies moving in this way in California, and then what that looks like in West Africa. And
Mhm.
it's so ceremonial and it's so ancestral, but ancestral alchemy is about alchemizing that which is within us already. And I think many people have said this, but I think it's important to always say, because it's important to remember that yes, we have like the generational traumas. Yes, we have the things that we need to break those cycles, but we also have the good things
Mhm.
and we have the beautiful things, and they are within us and they are our birthright to
Mhm.
access. And, when I watch or when I think about that particular clip in Rise, I think it's such a good, like, visual representation of what
Mhm.
I'm trying to do with ancestral alchemy, which is like, yeah, y'all, we have these tools, and yes, my particular lens is very much of, lukumi, because that's what I know.
Mhm.
And what I will never do is what many people do, what colonizing forces do, which is like paint with broad strokes. You know,
Mhm.
Africa, Africanism, Africanicity, the continent, the motherland, and the ways in which she exists outside of that respected continent, the physical, boundaries of that continent look so many ways.
Mhm.
I know a little bit of candomblé, but I don't know it enough to be like sharing things that are like not for me to share. But I like to be very specific and within the lens that I'm coming from. And, you know, um, the work is it's just something that I felt called to do, and it felt called to do it at the moment. And I think also like growing up with these practices, like being so ingrained in my family, I'm coming to this work different. I believe it's beautiful when folks get any call from something higher to be like, hey, tap in. Hey, you don't gotta go through this alone. I think that's beautiful. I've also seen lots of misinformation online. I've also seen lots of things that are harmful. And while I don't believe it's intentional, I think it's a harm that can kind of be born out of a desire to reconnect and a desire to reach back and a desire to unlearn, to relearn. And so because I was seeing some things that for me were questionable, I'm like, oh, that's not necessarily what I would equate this thing with, or oh, I'm not sure why this person is sharing this information because it's not for them to share. Lots of these practices are very sacred, and you don't go through like a ceremony is ceremony because it's sacred, and because like you got to go through something to get to another place. And being somebody who's not just a practitioner but an oloricha myself, like I have one white for a year in 7 days. I have taken an oath. I was bald. I did not have hair. Like I have gone through these things, and my mother has as well. I like to try to share from my personal perspective of my views on what different deities mean and how they can show up and how they do show up, for us in our lives, from, the small moments to the big moments. And I don't, update the page as much as I'd like to, but I do it when I feel called to.
Yeah.
Because I think, oh, there's nothing worse than like forcing work. Oh my goodness. Forcing creativity is trash. Like,
Yeah.
have you ever tried to, oh my God, I've tried to write things that are forced. I'm like, this is horrible.
You feel it in your body as it's happening. You're like, oh, this is just wrong, wrong,
Wrong,
wrong.
and like totally like not my voice, and like so not representative of like what I can do. But yeah, I think like I know that it exists now, and anything that exists now that is about self-preservation, that is about unlearning, that is about relearning, that is about reaching back, that is about answering the call to a greater purpose. I believe it is all work of the movement, the capital M movement. But
Mhm.
I've never necessarily considered the ways in which it like specifically intersects within this moment. So thank you for bringing that up, because it's very cool to see how, like, when you, as you know, as a creative, like when you're in something and working on the thing, whatever it is, you just are kind of here. And so you don't really always understand how folks see your work. So it's just really dope. So thank you for doing that.
No, absolutely. It's certainly been inspiring to witness the work. The vibes, like I said, are very present around the intention and the careful consideration you all take in what you are presenting. And I just think it's a great model. So I would love to hear any advice or words of affirmation that you might have for people who like want to capture their story or history, right? Because by the way, y'all, capturing ourselves in real time is also archival work, right?
Yeah.
Like we don't have to wait to be the ancestor or 6 feet under for somebody to take on that work. Like if we really see the power in what we're doing, there are ways in which we can do it in real time, and every story is valid, and you don't need to have a bunch of impressive accolades in order to be deemed worthy of being archived. Every experience has medicine for someone else in the world. How it gets to those people, not your business, but it is your business to capture it. So I'm curious for you, what are some words of affirmations or advice that you have for people who don't consider themselves storytellers or creators or archivists who want to get into this kind of work?
We all have stories that matter. Our lives matter. Our existences matter. We all have something to share, and we all have something to learn. And there's never been a time, I think, that we have had access to all of these things. We have had access to smartphones or a phone.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding that access to technology is also something that many of us take for granted. But relatively speaking, we all have a phone. We all have a way to document. And I think it's just about getting curious. Get curious. Like, we do not know everything. I don't know everything about my parents. You don't know everything about your parents. Get to learn so that you can, and your community, get to learn so that you can pass these things down. I think now more than ever, but always as well, it's so important to like know where you come from, to know where you are, and to have a better sense of where you're going. And so for me, that's what I would say. Like everything is important. Everything is important. My grandmother, she passed away in June, and I think about the fact that like she like ad nauseum would talk about her stories, and she would, okay, grandma, I understand. Okay, grandma, I know this one. Oh yeah, grandma, yeah, you told me this before. May she rest in peace. My girl, my sweet, sweet girl. But like, thank God she did that, because
Mm-hmm.
now for my kid and for my kids and for the future and everyone who's listening to this podcast, like they'll know something about grandma. Like she loved potatoes,
Right.
like grandma and her potatoes, like that was her thing. So it's important, get curious. We don't know it all. Don't be arrogant. Be a listener. We talk too much. Listen, let's like decentralize this and recenter this. That's
Yes.
what I would say.
I love that. And even you naming, they're like, oh, we know she loves potatoes. Like, as somebody who comes from a family where all of the history is oral and a lot of things were lost along the way. And so the things I know the most actually start with my parents. I was born after all of my grandparents had already passed. And so like, and some of my mom's parents, for example, died by the time she was 13. So from a family aspect, we don't know these things. So as somebody who does ancestral work, it's like I have then had to do the double work of like, well, how do you learn more about what they like when you want to make offerings, right? Like little details like that sometimes are really the difference maker. And so I always appreciate when I go to DR and I, talk to someone who knew an elder who I never got to met, and they just start sharing and sharing because it collects and it deepens my relationship with them in a way that's really special. And I can be quite impatient sometimes. So sometimes sitting at the altar and waiting for the answer is not my jam. We're working on it. But like, having that is super, super important. So if nothing else, just know that what you all are preserving, sharing, and documenting might be of service to your bloodline or to community in a larger way that you will never know. Right. And it's not your business to know, but it is your business to document. So I really appreciate that insight. All right. So I'm so glad that the people got to hear all of this. This has been such a rich conversation. Djali, thank you so much for all of your gems. Before we go, any special shout outs or anyone who you want to highlight or anything coming up you want to highlight?
Oh my goodness. I would just say to like stay tuned because, figuring it out. There may be something new that I'm dropping because I think that there's something that people need that I'm like cultivating, but it's still in the incubator.
I love that.
And yeah, no, just shout out to like everyone who has been such an important part of my particular postpartum journey in my village. And then shout out to everyone who is that for other people.
Yes.
Anyone who is there texting their friends back at 3 a.m. or just holding space. Like shout out to everyone who holds space in all the capacities for like new parents, because y'all are the MVPs.
Yes. Support our parents. I'm one who has a bunch of friends with babies that live out of state, and I am not the best at always being on the pulse, but when I'm on the pulse, I am very, very deeply, like when I'm present is because I'm ready to be present in all of the ways. But we really do need that support, because if it's true that they're about to push everybody to have babies, y'all, then we need to get our community practice together, and
Absolutely
restructure the village so that we can survive, because that's how we've done it. To your point of what you said earlier, all of these moments of resistance happen through community action and collaboration. So yeah. So tell us, where can we find you and your work? Where should we follow you?
My work. I have like 3 things I can plug in. NuevaYorkinos, of course, on Instagram, and our website, Ancestral Allchemy on Instagram. That's also my Substack. I'm going to really be moving there. And so please subscribe. Right now I'm figuring out the logistics of, paid subscriptions. But once I do, that'd be really helpful for folks to just like lend $1 if they can. I'm going to really be writing. I feel very called to write. And then Djali BC, which is my own personal things, the way that I be talking, if y'all are interested to like hear the way that I muse. And yeah, just like staying open to all of the things that I'm doing. But Ancestral Allchemy on Substack, that's really where it's at, or it will be at moving forward.
Oh, I'm super excited. I'm on Substack, and I've been quite inconsistent, but I'm getting ready to get consistent as well, because we also need that paid subscription to be like up. Support is very much needed for all of us, all artists right now. I want to take the moment to just say, audience, no matter how small you think your contribution is, to continue to support people who are doing the storytelling work is crucial right now, especially in a time where stories are being distorted and histories are being distorted. So that is an act of resistance, supporting someone who is doing that good work. So follow me at Julissa and at Ladies Who Bronché across all platforms as well. Thank you again, Djali, for coming. And until next time, everyone, Bronché.